the zoo, and there is a sign with the inscription, "Dangerous," because predators are careful here. Zoo staff ask visitors to follow the following rules. You cannot go beyond the fence and cannot feed the animals. The heroine was cleaning and thought she was very lucky because today is probably just her day. Sunbae has some urgent business to take care of, so it's the heroine who's responsible for the predators. But it's only temporary. Sunbae asked Raynell to take over today and she agreed. Usually, Raynell doesn't like to have her job and responsibility shifted to her. But not this time, because she simply adores predatory animals and believes that these great mammals are very graceful and beautiful in their aesthetics. If she could, she would become one of the predators herself, and she thinks that it is a real happiness to be one of them. All predators are aloof and have an incredible appeal, and Grazia just drives the girl crazy and she imagines these monsters. The girl can't sleep without imagining them. Raynell believes that predators are the most perfect creatures created by their nature, and she literally serenades them just for the fact that she has the opportunity to clean up their waste products. The girl is very happy that she decided to become a zookeeper, and she gets wildly excited just at the thought that the predators are only a handful of steps away, despite the fact that Raynell's pasta work is very much to her liking here. But the next moment, a big cat appears in front of her and looks fiercely at the bald monkey who has come in here. Raynell doesn't quite understand what's going on. After all predators should have been closed, and where could one of them come from here? The girl still liked wild predators, but didn't want to personally face their dangerous fangs. In the next moment, the girl finds herself in a completely different place and does not understand what happened to her and where she is. The girl sees a large amount of greenery and wonders if she is in a forest. She is sure that she was last time in the aviary. But it's more like a safari zone. But their zoo has different trees. Raynell doesn't even know what's going on here, and she's trying to find her smartphone. The girl starts shaking her hand to determine how she's feeling, but the next thing you know, Raynell discovers that her hands are not hands, but wings. The girl turns out to be a bird, and that surprised her a lot about her. The girl didn't expect such a trick, and if she's just sleeping, Raynell starts to look everything around her to determine if she's dreaming, whether it's reincarnation or the curse. Why did she turn into a crow? It's truly horrible. The girl didn't expect such a twist of fate, and she gets scared. How could it even be possible, and the bird cannot now find peace in her soul? Of course, Raynell realizes that not everyone can be reborn as a protagonist, but why she seemed to be an animal and a crow, and that's really unfair. If it was Raynell's will, she could at least be human. Even if she was an animal, why didn't she become the predator she adored so much? And why did she turn into some pathetic crow? Why she has to live this cruel life as a stupid bird? Raynell imagines that she found the humans and the doctors said she was not to be envied. Raynell starts crying and says she is a bird, and another person would never imagine that she just wakes up and realizes she's a crow. That's a real insult to any human being. Now, how is Raynell to be how to live, and where does she go from here? Raynell feels her life has become a living hell, whether her bird life will ever make sense. But may God stay behind with all her problems. Well, what's she gonna do about food? The crow's main diet is insect corpses, bugs, and half-decomposed carrion. She doesn't want to eat such things, and to save her psyche, she can't eat them. If there really is a deity who has ordered her life, she wants to see him now. Raynell asks who needs an eye gouged out now. Raynell is even a little scared because she just liked the idea of eating someone's eyeballs. At least she can eat nuts and fruit, but she doesn't have that luxury, and she can't see anything edible in this forest. Does she really need to fly around and look for something? Raynell spreads her wings and marvels at how cool it is to fly. It's the only good thing about being a bird. The feeling of absolute freedom, and if that's how all birds feel when they fly, Raynell couldn't help but enjoy the feeling of being free. Maybe being a bird wasn't so bad after all. Then Raynell hears some sounds and someone says that she should find them quickly, and how dare they take their friend. Raynell realizes there's someone talking, and really, there are people nearby that Raynell can meet. The girl realizes that people are always a risk because you never know what those bald monkeys will come up with. But she too is a human being, albeit in the form of a bird. Instead of existing trying to get food for herself, you could just find someone to make her a pet and that's it. It's like being a kept woman, but simpler. Raynell could find an aristocrat or other rich man to take care of her. There is, of course, the possibility that some people would be put off by Raynal as crows are considered bad luck birds. If she can get someone's attention, it will work out, and Raynal intends to at least try. It's better than starving to death, so if it's decided and she flies up and charms them. But when Raynal flew into the bushes from which there was some noise, she was frightened. There is no room for empty hopes and dreams in this world, and she found orcs that looked very scary. Raynal doesn't understand why there are so many orcs, and they are really scary. After all, they shouldn't exist. The orcs talk amongst themselves and ask each other, who could have seen this brat that ran away? None of the orcs can find this guy, so they start to worry. Raynal realizes that the orcs are monsters who can't even read, and shouldn't there be some kind of attractive man here? But thanks to them, Raynal is sure of one thing. This place isn't South Korea or even the Earth the girl used to live on. It's some kind of fantasy world, and the problem is that orcs are a very popular race, so it's not quite clear if it's a manhwa or a novel or a game. Raynal. It remains to be seen where she's gotten to. On the plus side, she understands the language of other creatures, and the goddamn god can be thanked for having a modicum of conscience. But it's pretty clear that a higher being mocked the girl. Then the orcs start shouting that this human guy will be torn to shreds and the orcs will roast him and eat him. They would avenge their friend. Raynal heard and realized that nearby. There is at least one person and she could try to find him. What's more, there was someone out there pretty brave for daring to piss off a couple of orcs. Maybe there was a group of hunters or mercenaries here. She needs to find them before the orcs do. Once Raynal finds them, she'll warn these people or help them with something. Then they will be interested in the raven that helps humans, and maybe Raynal will be courted. Raynal wondered where these people had gone, and she just wanted to find someone. Then Raynal found this beautiful man lying with his back against a tree trunk. The man was obviously injured, but his beauty amazed Raynal. If Raynal was a girl, she wouldn't mind getting to know this guy better. The man says he was in real trouble. Who'd have thought a guy would be in this position? It's his indiscretion. No matter how good the opportunity to get close to the powerful Earl of Falun seemed, should never have been accepted. It's an invitation to hunt together. Perhaps it was some kind of devious Luvelian plan from the beginning. If he had awakened the divine power of the imperial family, this whole situation could have been easily resolved. Wulfric made rash decisions, since Wulfric's claim to the throne could be overturned at any moment. Wulfric asks himself, is this really the end of his short life? Meanwhile, Raynal watches the boy on the sidelines. Raynal realizes that she's sure she's seen this character somewhere. The next moment, Raynal makes the sound of a raven and attracts the attention of the lying wounded gentleman. The man realizes that it is the sound of a crow, because these birds are scavengers, and they usually hover over a battlefield or graveyard. And crows are a symbol of death, and it must be the hour when the hero will die. Apparently, the crow is waiting for the man to die so it can eat his eyes. The man begins to clench his teeth, and realizes that he wants to chase away this harbinger of death immediately, but now that the orcs may come out of the bushes at any moment, he should not make too much noise and should sit quietly and wait for help. But the raven starts to scream more and more, and the guy realizes that this bird is attracting attention. If it doesn't shut up now, it will discover them. The next moment, the crow takes off, and Raynal realizes that he needs to go somewhere else and get the attention of the orcs. The orcs realize that the bird has found the man and is probably waiting for him to die, so they must go after it. Raynal leads the orcs away. The standing man realizes that the orcs have taken the crow and begin to leave. Does this bird not want to taste his flesh? Meanwhile, Raynal continues to distract the orcs and flies low enough that the monsters don't lose sight of her. Raynal is glad the dumbasses followed her and realizes that the man is very strange, and she's seen this character somewhere before. But she can't remember what novel or game it was from. Raynal has to remember what this place is, and even if she doesn't remember, she has to keep that man alive, because apparently it's one of the main characters. She will help him not only because of his looks, but also because he is her only clue, and she can't let him die. Raynal is a little embarrassed because the guy turns out to be really handsome. The orcs realize that this bird must have decided to fly far away, which is very suspicious. But his brother says they should just follow it. Raynal thinks they've already traveled far from where the man was. Then Raynal decides to fly away from the orcs, and bringing them to the cliff, decided to hide. The orcs were very angry that the bird had tricked them. The orcs start accusing each other that it was a bad idea to follow the crow, and they probably won't find the white-haired man today. Raynal spits internally at these monsters who tried to kill her handsome boy. Now she saved his life, and she needs to find that man again. When Raynal came to the place where the guy was lying, she found a bloody trail, and probably he decided to run away while the orcs were not around. Raynal realizes that the boy's wounds are bleeding more than the girl thought, and that the bloody trail follows him like a red trail. Raynal doesn't know what to do, and maybe the guy won't survive anymore. It's not the orcs he should worry about, it's the bleeding. He should look for herbs that might help with the bleeding. But Raynal can't think of anything. Raynal doesn't know anything about herbs, and she doesn't know what herbs to choose. Because to the untrained eye, all these leaves look the same. Raynal is only an expert in the animal kingdom, but thanks to some inner bird sense, she can still recognize something and identify an edible plant from an inedible one. I wonder what she'll find with her internal radar if it will have an effect on humans. What if her instincts find herbs that are only good for the raven? We need to be quick. Find something good, then she'll think about whether or not their humans need it. If you're always worrying and thinking about bad outcomes, Raynal won't do anything useful. Meanwhile, the man cleaned himself up and washed up by the stream. It's a good thing that there was this place nearby, and the water will wash away the blood and its odor, and then it will be harder for the orcs to smell the hero. That's all very well and fortunate. But if that crow hadn't led the orcs away, the man wouldn't have gotten away with it. He was interested in the crow that kept him alive. He could easily have died if he'd fought the orcs in his condition. The bird symbolizing death itself saved the hero. It's ironic that this is the situation. But luck will not accompany him forever, and Wulfric must think what to do next. Wulfric next moment felt something fall on his head and decides to see what it is. Is not it used for bleeding? Wulfric doesn't know much about herbs, but he has seen this plant many times. What the sigils use to heal people. Wulfric starts looking around. He can't believe it's happening to him. The next moment, Wulfric sees the same violet-eyed crow on a branch. He can't believe his eyes. Could this bird be so clever and be here to save Wulfric? But in the next moment, the guy guesses that maybe the bird is the mage's familiar. In that case, he's clearly out of luck, and maybe it's even some kind of hybrid. But in the worst case, the crow could be a dragon polymorph, all of which are plausible. And it's definitely an unusual bird. But those who support the man do not have familiars, and hybrids dislike humans, so it is a dragon. Well, their race would not meddle in other people's affairs, and especially not in the affairs of Wulfric. Then, the guy ties a bandage around his stomach to stop the bleeding. He wonders why the crow is helping him, because it's probably unusual, but it's hardly one of the aforementioned options. Next, Raynal tosses Wulfric some berries, and the boy asks what they are and if the crow wants him to eat them. Raynal tries to make affirmative noises to confirm the man's guess. The guy starts to smile, and the crow seems to understand his speech, which becomes even more surprising. The hero trusts the crow, then throws these berries in his mouth and realizes they're so sweet it's like a confection. He will never be able to forget the taste of these berries. The flavor of this treat can only be compared to mother's milk. That's when their strange cohabitation began. Raynal would find fruit or herbs and sometimes warn the boy of dangers. Once Raynal even told him that there were big bears nearby and saved Wulfric's life once again. In the meantime, Wulfric caught fish and rabbits and then cooked them and shared them with Raynal. The girl was very happy to eat such delicacies because she would not have boiled a rabbit or a fish herself, but to light a fire. It was an impossible mission for a bird. It is hard for Raynal to think that she does not have to eat nasty insects and can eat like a normal person. Good thing she helped Wulfric, and he helps her in return. Later, the guy gives Raynal a name and calls her by her old name, without even realizing that that was Raynal's name in her previous life. Raynal obeyed Wulfric's commands and sat on his hand when he asked. At first, he gave her suspicious glances, but now Wulfric's eyes were filled with warmth and care. It was obvious that Wulfric had become a good master for the bird that saved his life. Some unfamiliar feeling began to dawn deep in Raynal's heart. She thinks it's what people feel when an idol calls them by name. Raynal felt that this handsome guy is her dream, and if she were a girl, her happiness would have no limits. Raynal is speechless. It's a sin to laugh like that. Her heart is in danger, and it's a real cheater. For such sinful beauty, people should be imprisoned, and she asks the boy not to laugh anymore. Then Wulfric even starts stroking Rainel and petting the animal. Rainel tries to convince herself that she doesn't like it, but she can't hide her feelings, and she melts in Wulfric's arms. The boy is happy to see that Rainel likes to be his pet. Wulfric realizes that up to this point he had no allies, and everyone around him was trying to either deceive him or betray him. And no one was willing to help Wulfric just for friendship. It's hard to think that there is a creature with whom Wulfric feels a surge of strength and an unusually pleasant feeling. Wulfric never expected to find such a loyal friend. He's so happy that he's ready to live his whole life out of the bird, ignoring the imperial palace and duties and just live a quiet and peaceful life. And he so wishes he could, but unfortunately he can't. Many knights have died for Wulfric, and the people will suffer because of the tyranny of Luvelian. Wulfric needs to go back to the palace, and if she goes back there in this state, it is likely that she will fall into the trap again. Luvelian has probably already put a price on his head, or declared Wulfric missing and taken his place. He needs to awaken the power to gain power before Wulfric will do anything possible, for his own salvation and the salvation of his people. Proof that he is a descendant of the imperial family, the imperial power lies in the ability to turn into a wolf. Rainel continues to fly in the clouds and asks herself what she should do. Rainel thinks about looking for some herbs before the sun goes down, and she can't do that at night. The next moment Rainel sees something glistening below her attention, is drawn to a strange object. Could it be a gem and it's too far away, so she has to fly closer? Rainel directs her wings towards the glittering gem and realizes that it is truly a gem in the middle of the forest, and for a crow such jewelry has no value, and better she would look for some herbs. But the next moment, Rainel realizes the terrible secret that her fellows seem to like such bright things. The girl can't contain her instincts, and the bird heads towards the shiny thing. Rainel is not in control of her body, and she doesn't realize why she is doing something stupid out of instinct, and Rainel feels a fierce Spanish shame because of these animal needs. Right now, Rainel is foolishly picking up a trinket in her paws. But she realizes that she is a human being from the hominid Homo sapiens. Let the last shred of dignity be left to her. But at some point, Rainel notices that the stone seems familiar. And in the next moment, Rainel remembers that it is not a gemstone, but a fruit called Kronbanrock. Kronbanrock contains the power to awaken a character's inner strength. This fruit can be obtained only once, and the ending of the game will vary depending on who the player gives this fruit to. This is a very important item, and moreover, if you give the fruit to a weak character, he will die without being able to resist the poison of the fruit, and the player will be imprisoned for poisoning and murder. It's practically random every time, and so she often wanted to throw her phone across the room while playing this game. Rainel found herself behind bars every time, and will never play this stupid and unbalanced game again. But unfortunately, Rainel is Korean, so it's in her blood to be stubborn. She's been playing this game all year and still successfully completed one character's branch. Why didn't Rainel think of this annoying and unbalanced game right away? But the reason is simple, and it's because Rainel played it 3 years ago. That stupid god sent her to this stupid game. And couldn't Rainel have been sent to another world? Does he want her to die here? How could God send Rainel to the world of a game the heroine can't even remember the name of? Next, Rainel's actively cursing God. The only silver lining is that she finally remembers the man, and his name was Wulfric, and he's one of the characters available to choose from. He's the crown prince of the Wulfric Empire. Now he's being pursued, and Wulfric himself is wounded. Rainel realizes that she came to this world when Wulfric was not yet eligible to inherit the throne. If memory serves, he has not yet received the power of the imperial family, and there will be many obstacles ahead. Rainel realizes she's probably destined to awaken this boy's powers. We must give the fruit to Wulfric immediately. So maybe in the future, when he has power, Rainel will still be able to find a way to return to her world. Rainel then gives Wulfric the magic fruit, and the boy asks the raven where he found the fruit. Wulfric says that Kronbanrock is not something that even members of the imperial family can get their hands on, and that Rainel is definitely not a dragon or a seer. But Rainel says in her own language that she has done well and asks Wulfric to keep praising her. Unfortunately, Wulfric doesn't understand Rainel's words, but still the general message was clear. If he eats this fruit, Wulfric's fate will change, and he must become stronger to resist his enemies. Either Wulfric would become stronger and all these obstacles would seem like a mere trifle, or he would die before the power of this artifact could be overcome. If the fruit cannot be digested, then Wulfric's life will be in doubt. Wulfric smiles at Raynal and says that if he dies, he will ask the bird to live a happy life for him, and then holds the fruit out to his mouth and swallows it. Raynal watches in amazement as a bright glow appears around him after the fruit has traveled down his esophagus and into his stomach. Raynal is amazed at the change, and it is truly a sight-striking action. In the game, Wulfric stopped being so damn attractive. Then Wulfric offered to take a walk tonight to have some fun. It was a scene worth giving Wulfric the fruit, but it's not the same situation now, and it's different. Because Raynal gave him Kronbarrock so that he could become stronger, and things between Raynal and Wulfric got a lot better. Wulfric says he feels very strange and powerful. The other forest dwellers run away when they feel this energy, and it seems dangerous to them because the future emperor has awakened his powers. But right now, Raynal believes that this power has brought them unwanted guests, monsters that have smelled a lone heir who may be in danger. Raynal realizes that these monsters should not manifest themselves when the hero awakens his powers, because at the moment of awakening, Wulfric is helpless. Raynal does not understand why the monsters have arrived at the right time, and perhaps that is the role of monsters in fantasy worlds. Perhaps Raynal just needs to fly somewhere, but she doesn't know if Wulfric can survive all this. And the girl thinks that soon he would need help too. Raynal remembers Wulfric's words about his death and realizes that Wulfric has gone mad because he said some very bad words. Raynal says it's a great idea to make the stupidest mistake in the world. Raynal demands that the monsters follow her and says to die just today, all of them. Raynal yells at the terrifying monsters that have come for her friend's soul and won't let them just kill him. She just has to hold out until Wulfric wakes up. She hopes she will succeed, but she's not sure because she's just a crow and has no powers. So we can only rely on her ability to create a distraction, which has worked for the orcs. Then Wulfric begins to wake up, and his body is raging with power. He feels pain inside every bone in his body, and it makes him want to die. But it must be endured, and Wulfric must survive by all means. He asks the gods to help him, because Wulfric will not abandon those knights who died for him, and Wulfric has no right to die, because then the lives of his defenders were wasted. Then the knights bought time for Wulfric to escape, and it is only because of these men that the prince is still alive. Then the knights say that Wulfric must live, and ask that Wulfric avenge their deaths to prove that their deaths were not in vain. Wulfric cannot die like this, and for the sake of his people, he must be alive and must seize power and finally do good for the whole empire. When God created the world, the sacred beasts that served him were sent to the lands he created. And then a miracle happened. Wolves were the only ones who could endow creatures created in God's likeness with their power, and it was Wulfric who possessed the power of the wolf that was passed down from generation to generation and to their people. In whose bodies the blood of God flowed could rule their people wisely. Wulfric had the ability to turn into a wolf to protect his loved ones. Then the prince turned into a sacred creature and saw Raynal scare away monsters. So they don't attack Wulfric, who is trying to transform into the new image. Raynal notices that Wulfric is finally awake, but her powers are already at an end, and Raven was too badly hurt. The prince has finally come to his senses and can fight both monsters and stand up for himself. A wolf in the form of a sacred animal attacks the terrifying monsters that have come for the hero's blood. Raynal realizes that she has fulfilled her role and that she can relax, after which the raven falls and realizes that now she can afford to rest a little. Wulfric turns into a human and embraces the fallen Raynal. Wulfric asks that Raynal not wait for him and live happily ever after. But why did the raven decide to take care of Wulfric and distract the monsters while he transformed? For such an intelligent creature, it was so stupid to stay by Wulfric's side, and if Raynal had left Wulfric, she wouldn't have had to suffer so much alone. Wulfric warms poor Raven with his arms and realizes he's tired of feeling helpless. And Wulfric promises that the bird will soon recover and he will be strong again. Wulfric leaves and promises that everything will be fine, but Raynal feels pain, and she doesn't know how long she was unconscious, and her whole body was in pain, and she couldn't even open her eyes. Then Raynal remembers the episode as Wulfric comes to some strange man and says that this raven is very dear to him, and asks that the man be careful because she has already suffered so much. The man says that he understands Wulfric and will take care of this poor bird. Some kind of magic started to be created over Rainal, and the girl couldn't understand what was happening. Next mix, Rainal wakes up, sees in front of her some hand with magical drawings. Next mix, the magic energy comes in contact with the bird's body, and Rainal starts to heal. Rainal flies up and doesn't realize what is happening. Then the magician starts to calm the bird and say that everything is fine. Rainal screams and wants to see his master Wulfric. But Wulfric says that everything is fine, and then takes Raven and tells Rainal not to worry because he will help her and everything will be fine. This is the residence of one of his loyal knights, and so we can relax a little bit for now. And this priest is the man who treated Rainal, so lets the girl not be afraid of this guy. The guy starts laughing and never thought that the day would come when he would treat a crow. And if someone asked him about it, the healer wouldn't admit it to anyone. But he decided to help only the prince, because if it had been anyone else, the healer would have refused. Rainal realizes that her body does not hurt at all, and she feels that her wounds are healed. The girl realizes that this is a wonderful magic, and why it is only allowed in fantasy worlds, because it is a real cheating. Next, the healer says he will deflect and asks Wulfric for the prince to let him leave. Wulfric says that he is very grateful to the healer and will definitely reward him. Next, the doors close and the prince sees the healer leave. Next, Wulfric stands up more sad and sighs all over and says that he was very much afraid for Rainal. The prince hugs the animal and says that Rainal is the most precious thing he has now, for Rainal cannot imagine how much Wulfric feared that he had lost the raven forever. Rainal was very embarrassed by this sweet man's attention. A storm of emotions rose up inside Rainal, for she had not expected to be so close to the prince. Now Rainal's heart just can't take it, and her brain refuses to think rationally, and she's never even held hands with Wulfric, but she's not immune to this, and now the prince is too close to her. Rainal is begging for someone to save her, and she just can't handle her emotions right now. She's in a crow's body, and why Wulfric is squeezing her so hard. Now it's clear why they don't get men for women, because all the handsome guys are taken by birds. But they will have nothing, because she is just a pet, and intimacy is out of the question. But then Wulfric marries another girl, and says that he is happy to remain a friend, and he leaves the ranks of losers and loners and goes in search of his happiness. Rainal realizes that in such a case, she can't survive such a loss, because now Wulfric is really close to her, and the girl feels at one with the man. But unfortunately, she is just a bird, and does not have the body of a girl, and does not even want to think that there could be another with Wulfric. If she's going to be alone, then Wulfric must be alone too. Rainal realizes that to hell with these couples and is really happy who is happy around the other. Rainal starts to say it in his Voronezh language, but the prince says he must have hugged Rainal too hard and overdone it. But Rainal says that since he decided to send in a girl game, he could have at least made the main character, and that God is a real heartless God. That was a real soul cry from Rainal. Wulfric calms Ravenel down and apologizes because it won't happen again. If her life was manga, she would have called it like inevitably becoming a crow or something. Wulfric apologizes for being overjoyed and misjudged his strength, so he apologizes to Rainel for letting himself go so much. Wulfric says he survived, only thanks to Rainel, and she helped him all the time. And in the end, he was able to awaken and become a true prince who can turn into a wolf, and that is the ability of his blood. Wulfric is very grateful to Rainel and regrets that she was hurt protecting him. Wulfric never expected to be so grateful to his friend, and doesn't even know if he will ever be able to repay all this, and can only promise one thing for sure. No matter what happens, he'll always be there for Rainel, that's why. Don't let her worry. Rainel is embarrassed because she didn't expect such words from such a handsome man. She doesn't really know what came over her, and I wonder what the embarrassed bird looks like from the outside. Rainel thinks that Wulfric's existence is a crime in itself. After all, this handsome man is a truly terrifying love villain for girls. Rainel thinks that the girls of this world should keep to themselves because it seems she can't give up this wonderful man, who is so sweet to Rainel. Wulfric goes on to say that Rainel must be so forgiving of him if she has decided to rub her head against his nose. If Wulfric does find someone he wants to have children with and live happily married to, she will peck that girl until she runs away. Singles are heaven and couples. Let them cook in their own infernal cauldron. They'll be together. Raynal looks menacingly at Wulfric with his plans, and Wulfric thinks it's getting hot. The next moment, a knock is heard at the door, and someone asks for His Highness's pardon. Wulfric asks for the guy to come in, and Galenos greets Wulfric. The man is loyal to his prince and is glad that Wulfric is okay. Wulfric says he hasn't seen Galenos in a long time and apologizes for showing up so suddenly. Wulfric knows that Galenos is loyal to the king, and so Wulfric has decided to find protection here. Raynal realizes that this man is Galenos, and in the game it was okay to flirt with him too. It's one of the male characters to interact with, and it seems he was a knight. And Raynal asks himself what kind of character this Galenos is. But unfortunately, Raven can't remember anything, and so it will probably all unfold as he interacts with this man. Galenos says not to worry so much, and it is every knight's duty to help the heir. Galenos then kneels down and says that on the contrary, he is the sinner for not being there for the prince and not protecting him in a moment of danger, so he apologizes for his transgression. His sin is so great that he dare not ask for mercy, and he atones for it by giving his life. Galenos then leans a blade-sharp sword against his neck and is about to cut off his own head at that very moment. But Raynal realizes that this is too bad, because it is forbidden for the handsome man to die without her permission, and asks Wulfric to save this fool in any way he can, because he must live. The next moment, Wulfric throws his arm forward and knocks the sword blades from Galenos' hands. This action was so lightning fast that even Raynal didn't have time to react. The sword falls and Wulfric says loyalty. This is very good, but asks that Galenos be more serious and not take it to extremes. Raynal beats his wings and says that Wulfric is a real smartass, and he did what noble heroes do and apparently doesn't want the handsome men to die in vain either. Galenos is outraged and says that how can he be forgiven and that it's just not fair. But Wulfric says that let Galenos not blame himself and that he simply could not be there because he was on a mission commissioned by the emperor, so it is no betrayal, and Galenos did the right thing. The prince then says that he is very glad that Galenos has not gone over to the side of Luvelion and extends his hand to the knight, saying that he will be very happy to cooperate. Galenos then tells the prince that how can this be and that he is serious about forgiving him, but Wulfric says that if Galenos still feels guilty, he should promise him something. Let him promise him something. The prince wants Galenos to be his sword and protect him, and Galenos has to show his best self. The man was so inspired by the prince's speech that he didn't expect such a thing, and then he raised his sword. Galenos says he is a knight, and swears to be Wulfric's sword and shield, and let the prince protect him. Galenos says he will protect the prince even at the cost of his own life. Raynal flies around the room and finally remembers Galenos' character. In the game, Galenos was a loyal knight of Wulfric. The prince further asks, is Galenos going to protect him at the cost of his own life, and even if he can never awaken the power of the imperial family? But the knight says that it doesn't matter, and he will only protect the prince by right of his ascension to the throne, and no matter what happens, he will always be with Wulfric. Wulfric says he thanks Galenos for his service, and will be very happy that such a loyal man will be by the crown prince's side, and his loyalty will remain unwavering. Raynal asks why Wulfric didn't tell Galenos that he had already awakened the power. Is Wulfric going to keep this information a secret from everyone? But why would he be interested since now Raynal is a raven? But he can't even ask anything, so Raynal will somehow find out what the prince's secret is. Then the prince says that if the prince doesn't mind, then could Galenos find out how he managed to return safely. Galenos heard that Wulfric was seriously injured, and it must have been very difficult. Wulfric says that he wanted to introduce Galenos to his friend. Wulfric then holds out his hand and asks for Raynal to come to him further. The raven falls on the prince's hand and asks if the master called. Galenos was a bit unsure and looking at the origin with great disbelief. Why is there a raven here after all it was sitting on the prince's shoulder before? Why would his highness befriend such a fearsome bird? Raynal and Wulfric realize that everything is written on Galenos' face, and it was clear what he was thinking without even asking. Wulfric says he knows what Galenos is thinking, but it was Raynal who distracted the orcs that were chasing him and found healing herbs to stop the bleeding, and she is his savior. Raynal smiles and realizes that she is a lover of eulogies. Raynal asks if Galenos sees how awesome she is. Wulfric admits that if it weren't for Raynal, he would have been dead a long time ago. Galenos very uncertainly says that he understands the prince and realizes that Prince Wulfric has always been a perfect and outstanding person who always took care of his subordinates, and he never showed his weakness and never showed it to anyone. Because if Wulfric made one little mistake, his life would be in danger because of the already awakened third Prince Luvelian. It was hard to believe that the Prince Wulfric, whom Galenos knew from this side of him, would smile so sweetly at the bird of death. Wulfric has never had any friends, and as expected, his highness is made of different dough. Galenos realizes that since even a mere raven can recognize this, he, as his highness's personal knight, must be closer to him and simply can't give in to some bird. Galenos further tells the crow that he can fight it one-on-one and they will fight until one of them goes. Galenos looks at Raynal with fire in his eyes, and the girl realizes that his eyes are burning terribly, and however much prejudice can't disappear in one day, and she still has a long journey ahead of her. Wulfric says he was very happy to introduce Galenos from Raynal, so he has a couple more questions for Galenos that need to be addressed as well. First, Wulfric wants to know what's going on in the Imperial Palace, and Galenos says that if the prince is referring to the situation after his disappearance. Wulfric says that's what it must have been. He was framed as missing. Galenos goes on to say that Wulfric is correct in his thinking, and that although the knight's body was found, there was no trace of Wulfric nearby. Search parties were formed to go in search of the esteemed Prince Wulfric, but they were all Luvelian's men. So there was no need to hope that these men could somehow aid, and most likely they would have orders to destroy Wulfric. And perhaps Galenos should quote His Highness the Third Prince, who said that how could he stand idly by when his older brother was missing? It was Luvelian who spoke and laughed as if to mock his brother, so on his initiative the Emperor assembled the search parties. Wulfric says that this is a real nonsense, and that Luvelian must have gone mad and managed to deceive everyone. Such concern over his enemy's disappearance. If only Luvelian would learn to play to the public, or his intrigue can be unraveled in a heartbeat. Wulfric thinks everyone knows who's behind this. Galenos doesn't know for sure, but His Majesty the Emperor has given his permission. Obviously nothing surprising, and his father just wants an heir to the throne, no matter who it is. Raynal realizes the conversation is creepy and insidious. This is the war for the throne. Raynal is not used to such cruelty, and anyway, letting her own sons fight for the throne with their lives on the line is too cruel, even if it is the Blood Emperor. But why does the father allow his sons to kill each other? Apparently, Wulfric has been through a lot up to this point, and has hardened himself through battles for his life and intrigue in the palace. Raynal tries to calm Wulfric down somehow, and the boy realizes that Raynal is probably trying to comfort him. Raven was very happy to be near his master, and Wulfric asks Raynal not to worry, and everything will be fine, and now Wulfric is ready for everything, and will not let all the efforts and sacrifices turn out to be easy. Wulfric then tells Galenos to send to the capital and inform father that Wulfric is alive. Galenos is surprised that Wulfric is holding this crow so carefully. Galenos then asks if Wulfric is sure, and if he reports that Wulfric is alive, Prince Luvelian will be displeased. Wulfric says, with hardness in his words, that his brother will pull something again, and it won't be soon. So the team will have time to prepare, and since he told the Emperor to worry about him, he will have to act like a caring brother for a while. And even if Luvelian decides to attack Wulfric in the open, let him do so, and they'll see whose side takes it, because now Wulfric has awakened and can stand up for himself. All thanks to Raynal, who helped him with the fruit and protect from monsters. Then Raynal watched as people started to run and gather supplies. Finally, they will go to the palace, and Raynal can't believe that she will go straight to the Imperial Palace, which she saw only on the screen, and remembered that it was very luxurious. But she must hear everything and pay attention, because that's where the enemy Wulfric dwells, who would love to kill his brother's pet. Now she is even glad that she was not reborn with a human, because then it would be a weakness for Wulfric, and most likely she would be quickly killed or removed. No one would have liked the fact that he was basically bringing a beardless stranger with him, and then the girl the prince had brought with him could easily be used as a hostage. Raynal realizes that she could probably hide in the beast's body now, so it's much safer to be the prince's pet for now. Wulfric says that he has finally seen Raynal and she has been here all this time. Raynal asks, "Is everything ready?" But of course, Wulfric doesn't understand Raynal's words, but still says it's time for them to go. So he apologizes to Raynal in advance and puts her in the cage. Reynolds did not expect such treatment, but Wulfric says that they will have to be patient until they reach the capital and asks Reynolds not to take offense. Reynolds starts to shake. And now Wulfric has let himself put her in a cage. It's a real betrayal, and Reynolds isn't just going to give up. When she worked at the zoo, she saw beautiful pandas called Glee. They were marvelous animals. And every time she had to transport the animals in cages, it was like a fight to the death. The animal never wanted to get into the cage, and it was a very terrible punishment. It scratched her skin, and Reynolds was dying from the constant cutting pain. And she had a lot of scars on her arms. And now Reynolds was in the poor animal's place, and she realizes that Wulfric is a real booger, and if he lets her out right now, she won't be angry. Reynolds realizes that she's very angry right now, and everyone is pissing her off. One of the butlers says he's asking to let the prince take the animal himself, but Wulfric says he can handle it. Don't let the butler worry. Reynolds realizes that the panic is making things worse, and her head starts to spin, and her eyes get dark and helicopters like she's been drinking all last night. The girl sees a black grate in front of her, and everything is blurred behind it. Now she realizes she's starting to feel nauseous. Late at night, Wulfric lets Reynolds out and asks if his pet is all right. He apologizes because he didn't know it would be so hard on Reynolds. Reynolds realizes that now Wulfric has asked how she is feeling. And how could he have the nerve to do that? Reynolds doesn't know how to contain her anger, and she is very angry with Wulfric. So she bites his finger. Reynolds says that Wulfric is ungrateful and that she has worked so hard to earn his favor. One must live honorably, and the prince has done very badly of the heroine, so any girl would take offense at him. Wulfric realizes that the similar raven is really very angry. Wulfric tries to calm the bird and say that it is all behind him, but Reynolds asks angrily, does Wulfric think she will forgive him if she strokes him? And do they think she has no pride at all? But the next mix, Reynolds starts to blur under Wulfric's hands, and his touch makes Reynolds look like jelly. Wulfric apologizes for making Reynolds suffer so much, and he didn't mean to cause such agony. But he had to take it with him, and he didn't want to leave her alone. The prince had no choice and just wanted Reynolds to be with him. Reynolds looks at Wulfric and realizes he's a little surprised. Wulfric goes on to say that the most important thing right now, it's who Reynolds really is. Is she a hybrid or a dragon? He was lucky enough to meet her, so he asks Reynolds not to leave Wulfric. The next moment, Wulfric kisses Reynolds and the girl. Albeit in the body of a raven, she felt the touch of the man's lips, and he was so beautiful that it was as if her inner female essence came into contact with him. Reynolds didn't understand. Was she now being kissed by such a handsome guy, and what struck her more was that he had kissed a bird and not a man. Reynolds was shocked, but Wulfric was beginning to admit that he had a lot of enemies in the palace. He constantly had to doubt people and think about who to trust, and who he couldn't. No, but that's why the prince had to trust no one. The only one Wulfric could trust now. He has no other allies, so he thanks the bird for all her kindness. Reynolds realizes that this is Wulfric's moment of weakness, and the thoughts he can't share with anyone, so he tells everything to the bird that he can only listen but can't say anything. Reynolds finds herself in a very interesting situation, and if she were human, Wulfric would not show her his true side, and would hide from her like other people. Reynolds realizes that even if she can't help Wulfric because she's a mere raven, she promises that she will be on his side. Wulfric thanks Reynolds for understanding, and the girl is probably burning with shame right now, and she wonders if the crow can see her blushing. Most likely, the prince can't see the blood rush, and perhaps being in the raven's body would do wonders for hiding her true emotions. When Reynolds finally arrived at the palace, she was surprised at the beauty she saw. This imperial palace was simply magnificent. The girl never thought she could see such beauty. Next, Wulfric shows herself to all her room and asks if she likes this bedroom. Reynolds realizes that there is a huge amount of shiny things here, and to her animal brain it is just gorgeous, and no one would know if Reynolds stole a few. Reynolds wonders how much all this wealth is worth, and she realizes that her raven instincts are starting to get the better of her again, and Reynolds tries to tell herself that she has to pull herself together because she is human, and Homo sapiens has gone through all this complex evolution for a reason. Wulfric says that he will leave her for a while and asks Reynolds not to be bored. Wulfric has urgent business to attend to, and Reynolds needs to sit tight until the prince returns, or the bird will be in trouble. Reynolds agreed with Wulfric and positively made her bird sound. She didn't notice that Raynal was drooling over all this luxury. Wulfric further orders the butler to take care of this bird while he is away, and the butlers agreed. As Wulfric was leaving, he said in a very stern voice, so stern that the butler was scared to death, that he had to be careful and treat the bird as if it were a prince, or else. Let the butler try to disobey, and he will know what will happen. Then the prince leaves, and the butler realizes that he wants to go home because this is a truly horrible situation. The butler realizes that he has a very difficult lot, and finds it hard to believe that he has to take care of the bird of death. Raynal looks at the butler with such piercing intensity that the man begins to have thoughts that the bird wishes him dead, and he still cannot disobey the prince and needs to feed Raynal. Next, the butler offers Raynal some food, and the clever crow looks at the treat, what the butler provides. Raynal in the form of their worms, and realizes that she will definitely not like this kind of thing. Raynal was so shocked by what she saw that she wouldn't eat it. She's speechless, but the butlers notice that Raynal is shaking with anger and won't accept the treats. The boy says the birds like worms, so he wonders why Ravenel didn't like such treats. Now the butler is even more scared of what to do. Raynal screams with all her might that she hates this situation. For a while, Wulfric thinks that he must have heard Raynal's voice. Raynal asks for Wulfric to hurry back, and she is lonely here. And also, there is nothing to eat. Wulfric thinks that he must be getting worried, and maybe he was wrong to leave Raynal alone. Raynal realizes that Wulfric should have heard her scream, but for some reason he doesn't come and is probably very busy. Wulfric realizes that he needs to finish his business quickly and return to his bird. Then Wulfric meets his younger brother and says that he is very glad that Wulfric turned out all right. It's the third Prince Luvelian, and Wulfric looks at Luvelian with a very horrified air, saying it's been a long time since they've seen each other. And Luvelian approaches his older brother because he was very worried and shocked to learn that Wulfric had gone missing after going to the hunting grounds. It was very dangerous for someone whose powers had not yet awakened. With those words, Luvelian was trying to make the point that his older brother has no powers. Wulfric realizes that Luvelian has not changed at all, and a smile appears on his face at the sight of this fool. Still, Luvelian thinks that Wulfric will fall for it, on this pathetic provocation, and he is not at all afraid of such words. Wulfric apologizes for all this excitement for Luvelian, and he must play along with his younger brother. But he fears this time Luvelian has gone too far, and it seems that Wulfric has said something wrong. Wulfric realizes that apparently Luvelian is very shaken up by the little backhanded tease, and apparently Wulfric thought so. The third prince, Luvelian, got all the support for one reason only, because he had already awakened his powers and was able to turn into a wild animal. Having learned the taste of influence and authority, he made no effort to develop himself or strengthen his position, so he spent his time with women and grew arrogant and rather stupid. And it's true even now, and still Wulfric can't sense the aura of Luvelian, even though he's awakened too. That can only speak of his younger brother's weakness. That is why Luvelian has not yet become the rightful heir, because compared to Wulfric's power, he is nothing. Wulfric says that he will try to play along with his next prank better than he did this time, and thanks him for his efforts in setting up the search parties, and apologizes for having to work in vain. Luvelian says with fear in his voice that he doesn't understand what his older brother is talking about, and Wulfric realizes that so far he hasn't been able to fight back properly due to lack of support. Wulfric must now meet with his father and asks that he and Luvelian agree next time. Wulfric leaves behind his frightened younger brother, and however, now things will be much more fun. And let Luvelian see how Wulfric has changed. The eldest son passes through a row of guards that guarded the chambers of the Imperial Majesty and Wulfric's father. Then the eldest son falls to his knees and says that he is honored to meet His Majesty. Wulfric shows all his respect and says that the first Prince Wulfric greets His Highness. Meanwhile, the father is shaking from his illness and says that he heard how Wulfric disappeared. He is glad that everything is all right, and Wulfric asks how his father's health is, and the man says that he is not bad without changes, but he is not on the mend. But at least what the son is worried about won't happen that way. Why don't we stop with the greetings? A father asks his son directly. Has he decided to come out of his shell? The father laughs and says that this is what the man who stabbed Wulfric in the back was afraid of, and he is talking about Wulfric's younger brother Luvelian. As expected, the father immediately realizes that Wulfric has awakened, unlike the others, because the father has good powers and can catch the aura at once. Wulfric says that he is very grateful to Luvelian because it was thanks to him that he was able to awaken, but father says that both Luvelian and Wulfric are fools. Wulfric starts laughing and sees that even the sickness has not managed to keep his father's sense of humor down. And then Wulfric puts his hand on the Emperor's weary and dried hand, saying that father should not worry, and now Wulfric will strengthen his position that was in a very precarious position before, and Wulfric will be able to make progress and find allies. Then father can relax and see his mother whom he has missed so much. Wulfric spoke the last words in such a terrifying voice that father was frightened. Wulfric asks his father to stay as he was until one of them wins. The father turns away from his son's gaze and says that Wulfric is a real impudent man, but the son says that he sees that sometimes the father forgets that he has always been impudent. The father realizes that he didn't bring up these impudent boys well and that he should have paid more attention to them. Wulfric says that if his mother had not died of illness, the inheritance could have been solved in a simpler and less cruel way. But unfortunately, they can't bring people back from the dead and cure deadly diseases, so he apologizes to his father and has to go. His father is left alone in the room and starts laughing. It's true that this is the kind of ambition Wulfric must have had. If his mother saw him, she'd have a look on her face. A wolf chooses a mate for life. If he loses his mate in unforeseen circumstances, he will suffer pain and eventually die and follow him. This is the fate of every wolf, and it cannot be changed. And father hopes that soon the day will come when Wulfric will take his place, and this meaningless life supported only by a sense of duty will finally end, because father cannot wait. He misses her smile so much. I would like to see her beautiful face and smell her hair. Meanwhile, Rhaenal lay in the cage, almost crying, from the hopelessness and suffering she felt. Rhaenal was hungry, and her stomach was empty. Wulfric had long since left, and Rhaenal had been suffering all this time trying to explain to the dumb as a cork butler that she needed human food. Birds have fast digestion, so Rhaenal feels like she's been starving for 3 days. The service is certainly terrible, and why they didn't offer her anything. Except for those wretched worms. The butler says it's very strange why the bird doesn't eat the food, and maybe it's not hungry. The butlers are worried. After all, if the prince finds out that he mistreated the bird, there could be trouble. Rhaenal asks why the butler is starving her and why she is suffering. Rhaenal covers her eyes with her wings and wishes no one could see her tears. The next moment, the girls toss another glass but with smaller worms. Rhaenal sees these horrible creatures and realizes she might as well try one after all, and as they say, starve the worm to death. Rhaenal thinks that on an empty stomach this plan seems acceptable, and now she is a crow with a human mind, but a bird's body. Rhaenal imagines in her head the physiology of a bird. After all, she was well versed in school biology. So this delight of the worm world would even be tasty by her raven standards. But the next moment, Rhaenal's consciousness beats the animal's subconsciousness and let the crow not relax. Because the main thing here is Rhaenal, who is controlled by knowledge therefore. Let her instincts not take over, and she will starve until the prince comes. Rhaenal realizes that she has almost betrayed herself by being blinded by hunger, and her raven instincts are really starting to scare her. If Wulfric doesn't come back soon, she'll really start eating those worms, and she'll have no choice. Rhaenal asks when the Lord will return. Wulfric arrives and worriedly puts his hand on Rhaenal's body that is already lying in the cage. Wulfric asks, "Has Rhaenal not eaten anything all this time, no matter how much she hates beetles? After all, the most important fact is that Rhaenal was starving." Rhaenal starts crying in his arms. Wulfric and the butler and the prince see the bird's tears. Wulfric says that he has not been around for only a small amount of time and how the butler allowed this situation to happen. Have him quickly bring fresh meat or fruit. The butler says he understood the prince and ran away. Next, Rhaenal began to eat human food and became full from hunger. The bird's stomach puffed up, and Rhaenal, in her joy, couldn't tell when her stomach was full. Rhaenal realizes that she is finally saved and can be proud of her stamina for not agreeing to eat the worms. Wulfric goes on to say that if she is full, let her join him. And Wulfric wants to give Rhaenal something since they have already arrived at the palace. Then Wulfric pulls something out of a box and says that Rhaenal can play with it as much as she wants. Rhaenal sees a lot of diamonds and different beautiful stones in front of her, and her raven subconscious goes crazy with the amount of these colorful stones. But Rhaenal isn't just any bird, she's also a crow, and she's not even a prettier bird. Rhaenal realizes that Wulfric really loves her if he gives her gifts like this. It would be cool if it were a person-to-person love, but even though Rhaenal imagines in her head how she would snuggle up to Wulfric, it is so unrealistic that she only has to think about such things. She is not a girl in this world, and until she is magically returned to a human body, she can only give up time after time and only dream. Wulfric asks Rhaenal if she likes the gift. He probably doesn't think Rhaenal is a representative of death, and that's already great progress. Rhaenal realizes that from now on she needs to pull herself together and move towards her goal step by step. Rhaenal drops one of the pebbles into the prince's arms. Wulfric blushes and asks Rhaenal, was it really his gift? And it seems his little girl gave Wulfric her toy, and the boy was incredibly happy at such generosity from Rhaenal. Had his little girl turned out to be so kind? Wulfric's face glowed with happiness. Rhaenal thinks that she is not an expert, but it seems that Wulfric is completely mad. Wulfric asks how a bird can be so nice, and when he becomes emperor, the crow will be the national bird of their country. Rhaenal realizes that this is wonderful news, and she is pleased to be in the prince's good graces. Now she will make him fall in love with Rhaenal even more. This is her cunning plan to become the prince's mistress, and in the future, his wife. Then Rhaenal was flying and enjoying her freedom, because it was wonderful to spread her wings and stretch out feeling free after a closed space. It wasn't that Rhaenal hated Wulfric's room, there were many things to do there. But it's more that Rhaenal needs the fresh air, and that's what makes a girl happy. The next moment, Rhaenal is noticed by one of the janitors and says that it is not heard that the bird of death flies in the prince's garden, and if it is not chased away quickly, he will have problems, and it is necessary to hit the bird with a broom. But the next moment, Wulfric intervenes and orders the servant to get away from the bird, and from now on, no one is allowed to drive the crow out of the garden. Wulfric says that he treasures the bird very much, and lets the man remember that he will answer personally to him if Rhaenal gets hurt on his watch. For the man, such statements of the prince were a real shock, and the man did not expect that he would find himself in such a situation, and sometime in his life would be responsible for the health of some bird. But still, the butler has no choice, and says that he will remember the prince's order. The man does not understand the tastes of aristocrats, but decides to leave quickly in order not to bother the prince's eyes. The man says he still has a lot of work to do and needs to get on with it. Wulfric sadly realizes that Rhaenal could be hurt, and how many times he will have to warn people not to touch her. Anyway, it is necessary to make some sign that this little girl should not be mistreated, because this crow is the prince's dearest friend, and it is necessary to protect her. The next moment, Rhaenal senses someone approaching, and it turns out that it was Levelian, and says that he has finally found his big brother Wulfric. He was neither in the room nor in the study, and thought that Wulfric had disappeared again. Wulfric says that Levelian came to him for nothing, and to leave before there is trouble. Rhaenal hasn't seen Levelian before, but says that she might get run over by a train because he's a real loser, who just makes a mockery of himself. Rhaenal asks what this loser has forgotten in the fantasy world, and to go home and look for another job. Wulfric asks that Luveliana has come to him and could send servants to search for him, but immediately the older brother taunts Luvelian and says that the younger brother has too much free time. Luvelian says that it is very sad that the bad treatment of a human sibling that only wanted to enjoy time together. Did his beautiful younger brother come to visit Wulfric? But apparently the older brother has already lost interest in him. The next moment, the two brothers locked gazes and the tension between them grows. Rhaenal realizes that the sparks are reaching her and that the atmosphere is eerie and that everything will be all right. And then Luvelian says that he has only come because he has heard some very interesting news. And then the older brother asks what they want to talk to Luvelian about. Luvelian says that it is the news that Wulfric has asked his father to leave the throne to Wulfric, to which Luvelian does not agree. Did Father Wulfric seriously set this up? Wulfric says with a sneer that this is true and the matter should be settled soon anyway. Who will be the next emperor and who is destined to die? Wulfric hints that his younger brother will have a bad outcome. Luvelian says he never thought he'd hear Wulfric say that. That's the older brother, who is a dumbass and couldn't even awaken the force. Wulfric laughs at an uncomprehending Llewellyn and says someone was stupid enough to think that strength alone would be enough to become crown prince. If you think about it, while he was away, Llewellyn had a great chance to win over the nobles to his side. But as Wulfric thought, Llewellyn did nothing, and the only thing Llewellyn can bet Wulfric is the awakening, so Llewellyn is very proud of his power. Rhaenys watches this great movie and realizes that Wulfric is really cool and support him. It's a real battle for the throne, and she's only seen it on TV. Wulfric approaches Llewellyn and takes him by the shoulders and says in an intimidating voice that let his brother think about it and who is the dumb one. In Wulfric's opinion, he is the one who has awakened but did not take advantage of a great opportunity when it arose. Next time, Wulfric will try to explain it in a simpler way so that Llewellyn will understand. But Llewellyn can no longer contain his emotions, and he begins to transform. He says that the right to the throne, they will settle the matter here and now. Beast-like body parts appear on Llewellyn, and his transformation takes place. Wulfric realizes that everything is happening just as he thought. The older brother has seen Llewellyn's beast-like form. Wulfric scoffs and says that the size of Llewellyn is more like a dog than a wolf, so it is a laughingstock to their family. Then Llewellyn's serrated fangs close in on Wulfric's face, and the boy realizes he needs to parry the blow. But Wulfric doesn't have time to do anything, as the next second Rhaenys crashes like a bullet into Llewellyn's face and pushes the beast away from his master. Rhaenys screams that Llewellyn is a real dumbass, and how dare he touch her Wulfric. Rhaenys yells that she is a raven who fought in a battle 17 against 1 and with a bunch of people. She was also always alone. So Rhaenys starts fighting Llewellyn as well, and using all her abilities. Wulfric realizes that his little brother can't even fight a beast-like form and a regular bird. If left like this, Rhaenys will definitely be in danger, as she is smaller in size. Rhaenys cries out that Llewellyn can't reach her, because she's tall. The next moment, Llewellyn opens her maw and jumps on Rhaenys. But Wulfric says that this is the end of Llewellyn's bullying and lunges at his little brother. Wulfric attacks the wolf with his foot, and without using the beast ability, Wulfric defeats Llewellyn. Wulfric tells Llewellyn that he came into his garden without permission and turned into a wolf, and then attacked Wulfric's pet. Llewellyn seems to have more than just the size of a dog, Wulfric says with disdain. That he doesn't remember any wild dog blood in Llewellyn's veins. So why does it feel like Llewellyn is a dog and not a wolf? Llewellyn shouts for Wulfric to shut up because he is inferior, and Llewellyn does not understand how such a brainless chicken dared to hurt his face. Wulfric says that as Llewellyn mentioned, he is inferior, a member of the imperial family that never awakened. Wulfric moves closer and closer to Llewellyn, and the younger brother shakes with fear because the foolish brother will remember one thing forever. Wulfric says, "Don't let Llewellyn think he's inferior in strength. It's only because he hasn't awakened yet, and it would be impossible to defeat Llewellyn with the size of a dog." More and more often, Wulfric thinks that Llewellyn will not succeed him, and that even without the ability to transform, Wulfric has more power. Llewellyn says that next time it will be different, and that he will be able to defeat his older brother when he turns into a wolf, and everything will be different. Wulfric realizes that Llewellyn is right, and now that he has awakened his powers, everything will be different. But it's too early to tell. If Wulfric takes the throne when his brother has more followers, there will be turmoil, and he doesn't want that. And Wulfric will get Llewellyn out of the way when his support grows stronger. So now his actions will be a little different. Wulfric calls for Rhaenys to fly to him and asks her to figure out what to do faster. Wulfric further yells at Rhaenys that she will definitely be punished today for her indiscretion. Rhaenys doesn't understand why she deserves to be treated this way, because it was Llewellyn who started the fight in the first place, so there is no need to yell at her like that. But the prince says that such behavior on the part of the bird was very dangerous. No matter how immature Llewellyn looks, in his awakened form he is much stronger than the average man. And if he had bitten the crow, there would have been nothing left of the bird. Now Llewellyn's ego is hurt because he can target Rhaenys. The girl was prestigious in Wulfric's words, and realized that the boss was in danger and she couldn't stand by while they fought. Next, Wulfric saw a demure cutie like Rhaenys and realized that his evil image was shattered, and Wulfric couldn't contain his emotions and apologizes for being angry. Wulfric realizes that he can't do that, and needs to come to his senses and say that he's immune to cute faces, and that Rhaenys isn't trying to be like the last time the monsters attacked them, She was being extremely reckless. Wulfric asks Raynal what would happen if Raven got hurt and how he would live without her. Raynal realizes that she has nothing to answer to this, because the fact that she was able to throw herself at monsters or wolves was due to her knowledge of these animals and past lives. What are the habits of wolves and how they hunt, and which part of the body is weaker? Raynal, as a student, had studied all the biology of the animals and had a great and vast knowledge from that field. She sat up nights absorbing energy to learn as much as she could before her exams. And because of her confidence in her raven body's reflexes, Raynal felt her power and impunity. The girl felt that she could be stronger, and of course Wulfric, who doesn't know it, may indeed find Raynal's behavior reckless. And just like her dog who yapped at a bus that might run over him, Raynal's sure that if she were in his shoes, she'd be angry too. But she can't explain it because she doesn't speak human. Raynal says in her own language that she won't make Wulfric worry anymore and apologizes to him. Wulfric then thinks that maybe he's worried for nothing, and maybe Raynal is actually a hybrid or a dragon, and could easily dodge an attack from an inexperienced Luvelian. However, if we remember the injuries that Raynal got when fighting monsters, it is obvious that she can't use her abilities at the moment, and there must be some explanation for that. Also, one cannot rule out the possibility that Raynal is just a very smart crow, so he has to protect her until he is sure that she can defend herself. Wulfric earnestly tells Raynal that she should not rush to his defense and put her life on the line for him, because he has awakened and is much stronger than before, and moreover, Wulfric does not want to lose Raynal to someone like Luvelian. Meanwhile, in his room, Luvelian was destroying. Everything around him, and he was just beyond furious and questioning how his brother Wulfric dared to do such a thing. Luvelian was so angry, but most of all he realized that it was that strange crow that had hurt him, and it was the cursed bird that had dared to touch his sacred imperial face with its filthy paws. When Luvelian ascends to the throne, the first thing he will do is destroy all the crows in the Empire, and order millions of their carcasses to be brought to him. These feathered creatures will never be seen again. Yet somehow, Wulfric was defending the raven. Luvelian's thoughts became interconnected. Before, Wulfric had simply ignored his mockery of birds and animals. It is necessary to find out more about this bird, because Luvelian can be very painful to Wulfric if he gets rid of this animal or uses it to negotiate with his brother. This is an order from the future emperor, and as soon as possible the mirror must create what he needs. Luvelian demands the sacred artifact's help. A dark wizard appears behind the mirror and says that everything will be fulfilled and the prince will get what he needs. Then the fog thickens and the wizard disappears, but only his glowing white eyes remain in the mirror's reflection for a few moments. The events move to Wulfric's office, where Raynal sits on his shoulder and sleeps peacefully while drool falls from her beak. Raynal thinks that Wulfric should rest too. Then a knock is heard at the door, and Wulfric is told that the Marquis Namuel has arrived. Wulfric says that the guard should let Namuel in. Raynal hears a familiar name and suspects that she has heard it somewhere before. Next, Marquis Namuel enters the room and says she hasn't seen His Highness in a long time. The Marquis has come here because Namuel has the thing His Majesty asked for, and it is ready for the prince to enjoy. Namuel apologizes because he did not think he would interrupt Wulfric's work with his appearance and smiles radiantly, showing his white teeth. Wulfric says that let Marquis come closer, and to all this, Wulfric is surprised that Marquis has done much faster than he expected. But that very minute, Raynal rises abruptly from his seat and points his claws straight at Marquis Namuel's face. Raynal realizes that this is indeed the real Namuel. She is simply amazed to see him. Marquis Namuel is the eldest son of a duke and a brilliant magician, and this character had a very important role. The fact is that he is the main character of the game, although you could choose others, but his branch is the main one. Raynal didn't even dream of meeting him in person, and he was very handsome in the drawing, of course, but he's even more beautiful in person. Raynal flies around Namuel and realizes that he is very handsome, and she is smitten with this man. Apparently, her eyes have gotten God's blessing, and handsome men are better and they will save the world. Namuel says that Wulfric has a very active mate, and the first time she sees such a friendly crow is very interesting. But Wulfric begins to ooze sweat while feeling very jealous and envious. Wulfric asks what Raynal allows himself to do, but at this point Namuel starts playing with Raynal and says he is ticklish. Wulfric has never seen Raynal so friendly with other people. He approaches Raynal and angrily tells the crow to come over to him immediately and stop bothering his guest. Raynal realizes she was so blinded by the beauty of others that she forgot about her own handsome boyfriend, who is now jealous and envious. Raynal apologizes to Wulfric because she didn't mean to cheat on him. She is very windy, and Raynal hopes that Wulfric will believe her. Wulfric asks, "Does he need to have another educational talk?"